The invitation was sitting on the kitchen counter when Sara found the bank alert on her phone. Not a warning, not a mistake. A confirmed transfer of $41,000 out of the joint account she had been filling for 9 years. And on that same counter, right next to her coffee mug, was an invitation to her own wedding anniversary party, a party she had not been asked to plan, had not been told about, and had not been invited to attend. It was addressed to her husband's family. Her name was not on it anywhere, not as wife, not as host, not even as a guest. Sara stood in that kitchen for a long time. She did not scream, she did not cry yet. She just looked at the number on her phone and the paper on the counter, and she understood, maybe for the first time, that she had never been a partner in this marriage. She had been a resource, and the people she had trusted most had just made their final withdrawal. Before this story goes any further, I need you to sit with something. That invitation was for a party celebrating 9 years of marriage, and Sarah's name was not on it, not hidden, not misspelled, just gone, like she had never existed in this family at all. So tell me in the comments, what hurts more to you, being cheated on financially or being erased like you were never there? Because for Sara it was both at the same time. Stay with her. Because the moment she stopped asking why and started asking how is the moment everything changed. Sara did not grow up dreaming about a perfect wedding. She grew up dreaming about a steady life, a home that felt safe, a partner who meant what they said, a family that chose each other on purpose, not just by blood. She was the kind of woman who woke up early and stayed up late, who packed lunches and remembered birthdays and never complained out loud about being tired, even when she was exhausted down to her bones. She was not naive, she was not weak. She was a woman who believed that love, real love, was something you built slowly with consistency and sacrifice. And for 9 years, she built and built and built, not understanding that she was building something that was never going to have her name on it. She met Damien at a work event when she was 27. He was charming in a way that felt earned, not performed. He remembered small details. He called when he said he would call. He met her friends and made them laugh. He told her early on that his family was everything to him, that loyalty was the thing he valued most in the world, and Sara heard that and felt something settle inside her. She had lost her own father when she was 19, and her mother had moved far away to be near a sister. Sara had built her adult life mostly alone. The idea of a man who treasured family, who would pull her into something warm and lasting, felt like the exact thing she had been quietly hoping for. They got engaged after 2 years. His mother, Renata, cried at the proposal dinner. His sister, Claudine, hugged Sara so hard Sara could not breathe. His father, older and quiet, shook Sara's hand with both of his and said, "Welcome to the family." Sara cried in the car on the way home, not sad tears. The kind of tears that come when something you stopped letting yourself want suddenly becomes real. The wedding was beautiful. Sara paid for a third of it from her own savings because Damien said the family budget was tight that year and he did not want to start their marriage in debt. She said yes without hesitation. She wore a dress she had found on sale and altered herself. She made the centerpieces by hand. She wrote her own vows and meant every word of them. Damien's vows were shorter. She told herself that was just how he was, a man of fewer words but deeper feeling. She believed that for a very long time. The first year of marriage felt normal in the way that first years do, busy, adjusting, full of the small frictions of learning to share a life. They bought a house. Sara had saved more, so her down payment contribution was larger, but the deed was put in both names and that felt right to her. They split the mortgage, but Sara also covered groceries, utilities, and most of the household expenses because Damien was going through a complicated period at work and said he needed a few months to stabilize. A few months became a year. A year became a pattern. By the third year, Sara was paying 60% of all household costs. She had also started helping Renata. Small things at first, driving her to appointments, picking up prescriptions, dropping off groceries when the older woman said her knees were too bad for the store. Sara did not mind. She had always wanted a mother figure nearby, but Renata began to expect things, then to demand them. Then to schedule Sara's weekends without asking, calling Damien directly to arrange visits, repairs, errands, favors. And Damien would come to Sara and frame it not as a request, but as something that was already decided. Sara told herself this was just how close families worked. She kept saying yes. By the fourth year, something had shifted in the house, but Sara could not name it precisely. Damien came home later. He was shorter with her in conversation. He spent long evenings on his phone, and when she walked into the room, he would flip the screen over or navigate away from something quickly. Sara noticed. She mentioned it once. He told her she was being paranoid. He said that her tendency to look for problems was exhausting. She apologized. She apologized for noticing. That sentence would repeat in her memory for years. She threw herself into work. She had a good career in financial project management, and she was good at it, detail-oriented, reliable, calm under pressure. She got a promotion in her fifth year of marriage that came with a significant salary increase. She told Damien over dinner. He nodded, said nice, and went back to his phone. She told Renata, who smiled and immediately said that now maybe Sara could help Claudine with the costs of her new apartment since she was doing so well. Sara said nothing to that. She smiled. She filed it somewhere deep and quiet inside herself. The money from the promotion went mostly into the joint account. Sarah had suggested when they first married that they maintain one small personal account each in addition to the joint account, just for individual expenses. Damien had agreed, but over time his contributions to the joint account had shrunk and Sarah's had grown. She kept a spreadsheet because she was that kind of person. She looked at it sometimes at night, not to build a case, just because the numbers helped her feel in control of something. The spreadsheet was already telling her a story. She was not ready to read it yet. In year 6, Damien's father passed away. It was sudden, a heart event, no warning. The family was devastated and Sarah held everything together. She arranged the funeral caterers, she managed the logistics. She was the one fielding calls and organizing the reception afterward. She sat beside Damien through all of it, held his hand, said nothing about her own needs for weeks. Renata, in her grief, was sharper than usual. She said things to Sarah that landed like open-handed slaps delivered with a smile. She told Sarah once, during the reception, that it was a shame Damien had not married someone from within the community, someone who understood how real family grieving worked. Sarah nodded. She refilled Renata's glass. She did not leave the room. 3 weeks after the funeral, while going through some of the late father's paperwork with Damien, Sarah noticed something, a document, a letter from an attorney. It was not addressed to both of them. It was addressed to Damien and Claudine, and it referenced a trust, a property trust that the father had established years earlier. Sarah asked about it casually. Damien said it was nothing significant, just a formality. She did not push it, but she remembered it. The way you remember a locked door in a house you thought you knew completely. Year 7, Sarah had a close friend named Priya who worked in real estate law. They had been friends since college, and Priya was the kind of friend who told you the truth even when it was uncomfortable. Over dinner one evening, Sarah found herself talking more honestly than she had in a long time, not about anything specific, just about tiredness, about feeling like she was carrying weight that had no name. Priya listened the way good lawyers listen, without interrupting, without jumping to conclusions. At the end, she said one thing. She said, "Sarah, when is the last time you actually looked at all your accounts? Not the ones you manage, all of them." Sarah drove home that night with a strange feeling sitting in her chest. The kind of feeling you get when you already know an answer and you are only now preparing to ask the question. She spent a Sunday afternoon going through everything: her personal account, the joint account, the mortgage statements, the utility bills, the credit cards attached to the joint account, and that was when she found the first thread, a recurring transfer small enough to not trigger a notification she would notice. $250 going out every month for the past 14 months to an account she did not recognize, not a bill, not a subscription, a personal account. She sat very still. She wrote the account number down on a piece of paper, then she made dinner and said nothing. She found the second thread 2 weeks later. A credit card, not joint, in Damien's name only. But when she looked at the statements she could access from a shared filing she had never been told was shared, she saw that he had been using this card to pay for things that looked very much like a second life. Restaurant bills at places she had never been, hotel reservations, gifts, clothing purchases from a store she had never seen inside their home. The credit card had a balance of over $20,000. She took photos of every statement. She was very calm while she did it. Her hands were not shaking. She noticed that about herself and stored it somewhere careful. She called Priya, not in panic, in strategy. Priya came over the next Saturday while Damien was at his mother's house, and Sarah spread everything on the kitchen table. The spreadsheets she had been keeping for 7 years, the recurring transfer, the credit card screenshots, the attorney letter from the funeral paperwork. Priya looked at everything without speaking for a long time. Then she looked up at Sarah and said, "How long have you known?" Sarah said, "I think part of me always knew something. I just kept telling myself the feeling was the problem, not the situation." Priya nodded. She said, "You need to know what you own and what you don't, starting with the house." The house, Sarah pulled the deed. She had not looked at it since they signed it. She was on it, both names. But when Priya looked closer at the structure of the mortgage and the way several refinancing moves had been made over the years, she flagged something. There had been a refinancing in year 4 that Sarah had signed but whose terms she had not read carefully. In the process of that refinancing, a home equity line of credit had been opened. It had been used, significantly used. Sarah had not been told what it was used for. Her signature was on the original line of credit opening. She had thought she was signing a routine document Damien had set in front of her. This was not a routine document. Sarah sat with this for a full week before she did anything. She went to work, she came home, she cooked dinner, she was pleasant and quiet. She watched Damien across the dinner table and she did not let her face change. He noticed nothing different. That told her something too. It told her that her silence had always been invisible to him because he had never been paying enough attention to her to notice when it changed. She made an appointment with a financial advisor, a different one from the one she and Damien used together. She went alone on a Tuesday afternoon and she put every number on the table. The advisor went quiet at several points. He said she had been funding a household while another person had been quietly draining it through a parallel channel. Sarah said, "Yes, I know. The question is what I do now." He told her what she could and could not protect. He told her what accounts she had rights to. He told her what her next steps should be before she said or did anything that could change the legal landscape. She listened, she took notes, she did not cry in his office. She cried in her car for about 4 minutes. Then she fixed her face in the rearview mirror and drove home and made a casserole for dinner. The 40th $1,000 transfer, the one Sara saw the morning she found the party invitation, did not come out of nowhere. She had been watching the joint account carefully for months by then. She had her own account quietly growing. She had not moved anything out of the joint account yet because she was following advice and timing. But the 41,000 was different. It was not a slow drain. It was an emptying, nearly the entire balance. Gone in one transfer to an account she now recognized. The same account number she had found 14 months earlier and written on a piece of paper that was still folded in the back of her planner. She picked up the invitation. She read it again. 10th wedding anniversary celebration hosted by Damien and the family. A venue had been booked, a caterer had been hired, the same one Sara had found and loved and told Damien about 2 years earlier, the one she had said she wanted to use if they ever did a big celebration. The date was 6 weeks away. Sara's name appeared nowhere, not as host, not as spouse, not as a guest, just the family, Damien's family. Claudine's name was on it as co-host. Renata's name was on it as guest of honor. Sara was a ghost at her own anniversary. She put the invitation back on the counter in exactly the same position. She made her coffee. She sat down. She texted Priya 4 words. She said, "It is time now." What happened in the next 3 weeks, Sara would later describe as the quietest war she had ever fought. There was no yelling, no confrontation, no dramatic scene in a kitchen with broken dishes. Just Sara moving through her life with the specific kind of calm that only arrives when a person has finally stopped hoping the thing they fear is not real and has accepted that it is real, and that acceptance has freed them to act. The first move was legal. Priya had connected Sara months earlier with a family law attorney named Helen who had a reputation for being methodical and unmovable. Sara met with Helen twice that first week. Everything was documented. The spreadsheets Sara had been keeping for 7 years became exhibits. The credit card statements became exhibit. As the equity line of credit became a central point of contention, the $41,000 transfer was flagged and documented with a timestamp. Helen said, "You have been quietly building a case without knowing you were building a case." Sara said, "I was just keeping track of my own life." Helen said, "That is exactly what a good case is made of." The second move was financial. Sara had already consulted the financial advisor. On his guidance and with Helen's legal clearance, Sara moved a specific protected portion of her own earnings, funds that were cleanly and traceably hers alone, into a separate account. She did not touch the joint account. She did not need to. What she needed was a wall, and she built one. The third move was informational. Sara needed to understand the trust, the property trust from Damien's late father. She remembered the attorney's letter from the funeral paperwork. She found the attorney's name. She did some research. The firm was local. She called and said she was looking into estate matters related to her late father-in-law and asked whether she might schedule a consultation. The assistant said she would have to speak with the attorney assigned to the file. Sara left her name and number. She did not hear back that week. She followed up. She was patient and professional. On the third call, the assistant accidentally confirmed the name of the trust without meaning to. Sara wrote it down. She found it in the county records, public document, searchable. It took her a quiet Saturday morning and a cup of tea and a very particular kind of attention that she had always had but had never turned fully toward her own situation before. The trust was real. It held a property, not the house she and Damien shared, but a second property. A rental property that had been in his father's name and passed to Damien and Claudine equally upon his death. Sara had lived with this man for 6 years after that death, and she had never been told this property existed. It had been generating rental income the entire time. She pulled 2 years of records. She found the income. She found where some of it had gone, not into the household, not into the joint account, into the same personal account that had been receiving those monthly transfers she had first noticed 14 months ago. Sara closed her laptop. She made lunch. She ate it. She washed the bowl. She thought for a very long time. Then she picked up her phone and she called her mother, not to ask for advice, just to hear a voice that had always loved her without condition. Her mother answered on the second ring. Sara said, "Hi, Mom, I'm okay. I just wanted to say hello." Her mother said, "You never called just to say hello." Sara said, "I know, I'm learning." Her mother said she loved her. Sara said it back. She hung up. She cried for about 6 minutes, then she was done. 2 weeks before the anniversary party, Damien started acting differently, not different in a way that showed guilt, different in a way that showed something was happening he was not telling her about. He was home more, he was almost cheerful. He bought her flowers once, which he had not done in 4 years. He cooked dinner 2 nights in a row. Sara thanked him and smiled and watched. She had learned a long time ago to watch him the way you watch weather, not to control it, but to not be caught off guard by it. The flowers and the cooking were not love. She understood that now. They were management. Something was happening in the background and he was attempting to keep her in a pleasant fog. She did not let herself feel hurt by this revelation. She had already done that grieving in pieces over 7 years. She was past it. She was somewhere the other side of it, in a place that felt something like terribly clear water. On a Thursday evening, Claudine came by, unannounced. She and Damien went into the back room and spoke quietly for nearly an hour. Sara could hear the tone through the wall, low, urgent, occasionally sharp. She could not hear the words and she did not press her ear to the door. She did not need to. When Claudine came out, she hugged Sara at the front door and said, "We are so excited about the party. We have something really special planned. It is going to be a night the family never forgets." Sara smiled warmly. She said, "I am sure it will be something." Claudine laughed and left. Sara stood at the door until the tail lights disappeared. Then she went to her email and found the message from Helen that had arrived that afternoon, which she had been saving to read with full attention. She read it. She replied immediately. She said, "Proceed." What Sara did not know then, but would learn afterward through a conversation she never anticipated having, was what exactly Claudine and Damien had been discussing in that back room. Claudine had found out, through her own attorney, that Sara had been making legal inquiries about the estate. The county record she had accessed had been logged. Someone had noticed. The urgent Thursday conversation had been about how to handle Sara before the anniversary party, before some larger move they were planning became visible. Claudine had suggested reassuring Sara. Damien had agreed, hence the flowers, hence the dinners, hence Claudine's warm hug at the door. They believed Sara did not know enough to be dangerous. They were very wrong. 5 days before the anniversary party, Sara received a message through the family group chat. The message was from Renata. It was long and warm and full of beautiful language about family and legacy and 10 years of love. It included details about the party, the venue, the dress code, the program for the evening. It referred to the occasion as a celebration of Damien and the family's journey. Not once in the entire message was Sara's name mentioned. Sara read it twice. Then she screenshotted it and sent it to Helen and Priya with a single line. She said, "Exhibit added." She sat with the decision for a full day. She had been sitting with this particular decision for weeks. She did not rush it. That was one of the things about Sara that the people around her had always misread as passivity. She was not slow because she was uncertain. She was slow because she moved on purpose. When she moved, she was ready, and she was ready now. 4 days before the party, Sara filed. She did not tell Damien, she did not tell Renata, she did not post anything. She told Priya and Helen and her mother and no one else. The filing was clean and documented and supported by 7 years of financial records, 2 years of account monitoring, a full equity line of credit audit, evidence of undisclosed marital assets in the form of the rental property and its income, and the $41,000 transfer which Helen had flagged and traced to its destination. A personal account held jointly by Damien and a woman named Tessie who, when Sara finally looked, was not hard to find. She was a mutual acquaintance from the early years of the marriage. A woman Sara had met 3 times at family functions. A woman Damien had described, each time Sara asked, as barely a friend, barely an acquaintance, someone from the old neighborhood, nobody worth knowing well. Sara felt something when she saw Tessie's name on those account documents, not the violent shock she might have expected, more like the completion of a sentence she had been reading since year 4 and had been trying to convince herself ended differently. She sat with that feeling for a while. She gave it the time it needed. Then she put it in a place inside herself that was sealed and finished, and she moved forward. The morning of the anniversary party, Sara did something she had been thinking about for days. She got up early, she dressed carefully, she drove to the venue not to appear at the party, which would not begin for another 9 hours, but to see it. The venue was a beautiful private event space about 20 minutes from their home. She had never seen it before, which was remarkable given that it was allegedly her anniversary being celebrated. She sat in the car outside for a few minutes. She looked at the building. She thought about the version of herself who had hand-sewn centerpieces for her own wedding to save money. She thought about the woman who had packed lunches and filled the joint account and driven Renata to appointments and smiled at dinners while Renata told her she was not quite what Damien deserved. She thought about all of that, and then she drove away, not in grief, not in anger, in completion. Damien texted her at noon. The message said he had some family obligations today and would not be home for dinner, would not be back until late, and hoped she had a nice evening, just like that. No mention of an anniversary, no mention of 10 years, just a logistics message, like she was a roommate, like she was at most an arrangement. Sara replied, "Take your time." She set her phone down, she poured herself a glass of wine, she called Priya. They talked for 2 hours, not about the case, just about life, about who Sara was going to be when this was over, about where she wanted to travel, about the apartment Priya had seen that would be good for Sara when the time came. It was the best conversation Sara had had in months, maybe years. While Sara was on the phone with Priya, Damien was at the party, the family was there, Renata was at the head of the room, Claudine was toasting. Damien was charming and available and present in all the ways Sara had needed him to be at home and never had. People took photos. There was dancing, there was laughter. Sara knows this because one of those photos ended up in the family group chat that night, posted by one of Damien's cousins who had apparently not gotten the memo that Sara was not supposed to notice. The photo showed the whole family assembled, Damien in the center, smiling the smile Sara had fallen in love with. A celebration of 10 years. Not one face in the photo looked uncomfortable, not one person had asked where Sara was. She saw the photo at 11 that night, she added it to her files, she noted the timestamp, she went to sleep. The next morning, Sara was up before Damien came home. She had coffee made when she heard his key in the door. He came in looking flushed and tired in the way someone looks after a long, pleasant night. He said, "You're up early." She said, "I always am." He sat down. She gave him coffee. He did not say happy anniversary. She did not either. They sat in their kitchen in a silence that Sara recognized as the silence of a marriage that had already ended and was only waiting for the paperwork to say so. The paperwork arrived in a manner of speaking the following Tuesday. Damien was served at his office. Sara had made sure of that not to humiliate him, but because Helen had advised that serving him at home could create an unpredictable situation and Sara's physical safety was not something to be casual about. He called her 40 minutes later. She did not answer. He called again. She did not answer. He texted 7 messages in 20 minutes. She read all of them. The first 2 were confusion. The third was anger. The fourth was accusation. The fifth was a version of "how could you?" The sixth was a threat she noted and sent to Helen. The seventh said, "We need to talk, please." She replied to the seventh one only. She said, "My attorney will be in touch." Then she put her phone in her bag and went to a lunch she had scheduled with a colleague and ate a full meal and was present in the conversation. Renata called that afternoon. Sara did not answer. Claudine called twice. Sara did not answer. Her phone became a document of who was trying to reach her and in what order and with what frequency. Every missed call was noted. Every voicemail was saved. The voicemails were notable. Renata said that Sara was being vindictive and ungrateful and that she was destroying a family for no good reason and that she should think about what she was doing. Claudine's first voicemail was pleading. She said Sara was being rash, that they could talk this through as a family, that there were things Sara did not understand. Claudine's second voicemail was different in tone. It said that Sara needed to remember that she was not blood, that she had never really been blood, and that the family would protect itself. Sara listened to that one twice. She forwarded it to Helen. Helen said, "Thank you, that is very helpful." The process that followed was not fast. Family law never is, but it was thorough and it was steady and it was powered by 7 years of Sara's own careful record keeping. Damien hired an attorney. His attorney pushed back on several points. Helen pushed back harder. The $41,000 transfer was a significant problem for Damien because the timing, right before the filing, made it legally actionable. Helen moved aggressively on it. The rental property and its income were the second central issue. Damien had failed to disclose a marital asset. In some jurisdictions, that alone can shift a settlement significantly. Sara's jurisdiction was one of them. The house was the third issue. The equity line of credit that Sara had unknowingly signed for, the funds from which had been used in ways she had not known about and not benefited from, was now part of the record. Damien's attorney tried to minimize it. Helen did not allow it to be minimized. There were mediation sessions. Sara attended all of them. She was prepared for each one. She was not emotional in those rooms in the way people expect, no crying, no dramatics. She was factual and steady. She had her spreadsheets. She had her exhibits. She had 7 years of patience and the very specific kind of courage that comes not from being fearless but from having already decided that the worst had already happened and you survived it. 6 weeks into the process, Damien made contact through an unofficial channel. He called her from a number she did not recognize, a move she found both predictable and tired. When she saw it was him, she answered because she was curious what shape this particular conversation would take. He said he wanted to talk without attorneys. He said there were things he needed to explain. He said, "Sara, I know I hurt you, but some of this is being exaggerated and there are things you don't know about why I did what I did." Sara said, "I have a very clear picture of what happened." He said, "There were pressures you didn't see. My mother, the family situation after my dad died, things got complicated." Sara said, "I was there, Damien. I was in the house during all of those years. I made the dinners and paid the bills and drove your mother to her appointments, and none of that protected me from what you were doing in parallel." He was quiet. Then he said, "I never stopped caring about you." She said, "I know you believe that. That's the saddest part of it, S." He said goodbye. She meant it. She hung up. She noted the call in her log and told Helen. Helen said, "Good, do not take any more of those." Renata attempted a different approach. She sent a letter, handwritten, 3 pages. Sara read it with the specific detachment she had developed over years of managing her own emotional responses to this family. The letter was, in its way, a masterpiece of calculated sentiment. It spoke about how much Renata had always loved Sara, about how she had seen Sara as a daughter, about how families went through difficulties, and the measure of a person was whether they had the grace to work through those difficulties rather than running away. It said that Sara's departure would break Damien, would fragment the family, would undo 10 years of something beautiful. It said Sara had always had a place in this family. Sara set the letter down. She thought about the anniversary invitation she had found on the kitchen counter, the one where her name did not appear anywhere. Not as wife, not as host, not as a guest, just gone. She thought about the photo from the party, the whole family assembled and smiling, not a single person in that frame who had paused to wonder where she was. She filed the letter with the rest. Claudine showed up at the house one Saturday morning. Sara was home. She opened the door. Claudine stood on the step looking the way people look when they have rehearsed something and are deciding whether to say it. She said, "I just want to understand why you are doing this." Sarah said, Claudine, you were in that room with your brother the Thursday before the anniversary party. You had a strategy meeting about how to manage me. You did not invite me to my own 10th anniversary celebration. You sent a message to a family group that I was part of where my name never appeared. I understand why that felt okay to you. What I need you to understand is that it is not okay to me and it never should have been. Claudine started to say something. Sarah said, I hope you have a good day. She closed the door. She stood in her hallway and breathed slowly. She felt something that was not quite triumph but was adjacent to it. It was the feeling of a door closing on your own terms. The settlement came in month 4. It was not everything Sarah might have wished for in a different life, but it was fair in the way that legal documents can be fair when the evidence is undeniable. She retained her portion of the house equity with a full accounting of her down payment contribution. The $41,000 transfer was addressed directly in the agreement. A portion of the rental property income for the period of the marriage was assessed as a marital asset and included in the settlement calculation. Damien's hidden credit card debt was assigned to him alone. Sarah walked out of that process with her financial footing intact and a clarity about her own value that no marriage had ever given her. She moved into an apartment on a Saturday in early spring. She had found it through a lead from Priya, who had walked through it with her twice. It was smaller than the house. It had big windows that faced east and caught the morning light in a way that made Sarah feel, standing in it the first time, like something was beginning rather than ending. She brought her own things, the things that had always been hers. She left behind what was not. She did not leave in anger. She left with the specific peace of someone who has closed a chapter they wrote themselves, painful as it was, and is ready for the next one. She called her mother that evening from the new apartment. Her mother asked how she felt. Sarah said lighter. Her mother said she was proud of her. Sarah said, I'm proud of me too. It was the first time in a long time she had said something like that and meant it completely. She heard through Priya months later that the anniversary party had become a small legend in the family. The photos were still circulating. People still talked about what a beautiful night it had been. Nobody talked about Sarah's absence. Nobody had apparently thought to. That used to be the kind of information that would have stung. Standing in her new apartment with its east-facing windows and her own coffee mug and her own quiet mornings, she found she could hold that information and put it down without it changing anything inside her. She thought sometimes about the version of herself who stood in that kitchen, invitation in one hand and a bank alert on her phone, and chose not to scream. She was grateful to that woman. That woman had been furious and heartbroken and afraid all at once, and she had channeled all of it into a stillness that turned out to be the most powerful thing she had ever done. She had not won by being louder. She had not won by begging to be included. She had won by becoming impossible to ignore in the only language this particular situation understood: legal records and financial facts and the specific dignity of a woman who had finally stopped undercharging for her own presence. Sarah started a new project at work that spring, a big one, the kind she would have turned down in the old life because it required long hours and Damien had always made her feel guilty for prioritizing her career. She took it without hesitation. She was good at it. Her team told her so. She believed them. She went to the coast with Priya in June. They stayed 3 nights. They ate fish they hadn't cooked themselves. They slept in. They walked along the water in the mornings. Sarah stood at the edge once, just at the place where the water came up and touched the sand and then pulled back, and she felt something she did not have an exact name for, not happiness exactly, something older and more fundamental than happiness, the feeling of being fully in your own life. She did not need Damien to understand what he had done. She did not need Renata to acknowledge the years of small erasures. She did not need Claudine to apologize for the voicemail that had told her she had never been blood. She had needed those things once. She had ached for them in years 4 and 5 and 6. She had made herself smaller trying to earn them. She was done with that particular need. It had left her, quietly, somewhere in the middle of all those spreadsheets and mediation sessions and early mornings in an attorney's office. And what replaced it was something she had not felt since before she got married. Something that felt like herself. She kept the planner, the one with the folded piece of paper in the back where she had written down that account number the first time she found it 14 months before everything came apart. She kept it not as a wound but as a record. A proof that she had been paying attention even when paying attention had felt like a kind of betrayal of the trust she still, stubbornly, beautifully kept trying to have. She had been right to keep track. She had been right to say nothing too soon. She had been right to trust herself even when she was afraid to. She had been right in every quiet way that counted, and she knew that now. She kept the planner in the drawer of her new desk by the east-facing window. She did not open it often. She did not need to. It was enough to know it was there. Sarah did not get loud. She got organized. She did not beg to be seen. She waited until she had the evidence to be undeniable. And when the moment came, she did not blow up their world. She simply stopped holding it together. That is the thing nobody warns you about: quiet people who have been pushed past their limit. They do not explode. They exit, cleanly, completely, with receipts. If Sarah's story hit something in you, if you have ever made yourself smaller to keep a peace that was never really peace, tell me in the comments what part of her story stayed with you. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story today, share it with them. Some people are right in the middle of a kitchen moment right now. They need to know that the quiet way out is still a way out, and it is almost always the most powerful one.